Welcome to Pragim Technologies. I am Venkat. This is part 37 of ASP.NET video series. In this session, we'll discuss about the ASP.NET Wizard Control properties. Before continuing with the session, I strongly recommend to watch part 35 and 36 of this video series. Let's flip to Visual Studio, drag and drop the Wizard Control onto the web form. So we know that a wizard control is a collection of wizard steps, and by default we have two wizard steps here. Let's copy and paste this wizard step so we get a third wizard step. Let's get rid of the ID property here and then change the title to step 3. Okay, so the first property that we will investigate today is the active step index property. Now if you remember from the previous session of this video series, if we want to navigate between wizard steps, we can make use of these built-in buttons, the previous, next and finish buttons. But however, for some reason, if I want to programmatically control which step I want to show to the user, is there a way to do that? Absolutely. And the property that we use for that purpose is the active step index. Now we know the wizard is a collection of wizard steps, and it's a zero index based collection, so it starts at 0, 1, 2. So if I have 3 steps, then the first step index is 0, second step is 1, and the third step is 2, so on and so forth. Now let's say, for example, when the page loads, I want to change the skip the first step and show the second step to the user. So if I set that to 1, since that is 0 index based, look at what's happening. Step 2 is bolded here, which means when this page renders, then step 2 of the wizard will be shown to the user. Now we are doing that declaratively in the HTML source. Is it possible to do it programmatically? Absolutely. In the code behind file we can do that. Let's say, for example, for some users, when the page loads, I want to show them based on some condition the step 2 of the wizard control. Okay, how do we do that? Within the code behind file on the page load event, in real time we have several conditions. I mean, there could be several reasons why we may want to do this, but for now let's say if 1 is equal to 1, which will always be true, wizard 1 dot active step index is equal to 1. So you're programmatically changing that to 1. So if we flip to the HTML here, by default it is step 1, but then on the page load we are changing the active step index of the wizard control. So let's run this once again. So when the page loads, it will actually load step 2 skipping step 1. Okay, so that's the first property. The next property that we will investigate today is, all this while, if you look at the wizard control, to navigate between the steps of the wizard control, we can make use of these built-in buttons, the next, previous and finish buttons. Okay, but we haven't seen actually a cancel button on the wizard control. Is it possible to have a cancel button on the wizard control? Absolutely. And the way we do that is, there is a property called display cancel button, which is false by default, but if you turn that to true, then a cancel button will be shown on that wizard control. Now if you're wondering what is the purpose of this cancel button, it's left to the imagination of a developer. Probably the business requirement is that the user is not required to follow these wizard steps, and then maybe he has to go to a certain page within our application. So when I click this cancel button, I will redirect the user to that page within my application. Okay, or it's also possible when you click that button, you can navigate the user to an external site. For example, let's say, look at this. We have turned this display cancel button to true, and there is this cancel destination page URL. So the URL of the page that you want the user to navigate to when they click that button. Okay, now when I click this ellipsis button, then you can select any page within your application that you want the user to navigate to, or you can even redirect him to an external site. For example, let's say I want the user to go to pragimtech.com. I just type in the URL there, and then when we run this and when the user clicks the cancel button, he will be navigated to pragimtech.com. So I have the cancel button, and look at this. The interesting thing is the cancel button will be shown on every step of the wizard control. Okay, so on any step, if I click the cancel button, it's going to redirect me to Pragimtech website there. Okay, so that's cancel button. But then this cancel button has got several properties that we can use to customize it further. The most interesting property here is the cancel button type. By default, it's displayed as a push button, but you can change that to a link button. So if I change that to a push button or a link button, then you have this cancel button text, and you can change this to whatever you want. Maybe go to somewhere, or go to, Prajim. So when they click that button, they go to Prajim website. Okay, and the other button type that we have is the image button. So if you select the button type as image, then obviously you will have to specify the image URL for the image button. And how do we specify that? We have another property called cancel button image URL. Now within this application, I have images folder, and I have a cancel button image there. So let's set this as the image for that cancel button. So let's go to the properties of the wizard control, cancel button image URL, click the ellipsis button, go into the images folder, and select this cancel button.png. When I click OK, so I can customize that there. And there are several other properties that you can use. The cancel button style, where you can set the back color, border color, etc., and the height and width. Okay, so that's about the cancel button. The next property that we'll talk about is the display sidebar. By default, the sidebar of the wizard control is shown here. The sidebar is this bar which shows step 1, step 2, step 3. This is shown by default, but for some reason if you want to turn it off, maybe for space constraints, or your manager told we don't want to display that sidebar to the end user, you can actually hide that. And how do we do that? Just turn this property to false, and the sidebar will be hidden. Okay, and the next property that we will look at is the finish complete button type. Okay, now if you look at the name of the property, it's a little confusing. Finish complete button type. What does this mean? This means on the finish step of the wizard control, the complete button that you have, what is it, the type that you want? Do you want a push button, for example? If I go to step 3, that's the finish step for my wizard control, because that's the last step. So on this step, what is the button type you want for finish button? By default, it will be a push button. Okay, so finish button, finish complete button type. Okay, I can change that to an image button, just like how we have done it for the cancel button. And if you do that, obviously you will have to specify finish complete button image URL. So go to the images, and then I select finish button, I click OK, I get an image button there. And the same thing you can do for finish previous button type. Let's say here I want to set that to link button, and then in that case you want to set the finish previous button text, maybe to previous or back, whatever you want to call it. Maybe I want to call this back in this case. I can change that to back. Okay, and then the font and faux color are the regular properties that you can use to change the font and faux color. And you have header style. And another interesting property is the header text. By default, this wizard control doesn't have any header text. Now let's say I want to display some header text. Maybe we are capturing the personal details of an employee here, so I'm giving this header personal details. Okay, so that will be shown there, the header text, and you can customize this header style. Header style, what is this? It's a collection of style properties that we can set to customize this header style. For example, I want a back color of, let's say, dark green, and then maybe the faux color, maybe white color, and I want to bold the font. You can customize it to a great extent. Okay, and another interesting thing about this header text, you can even change that programmatically. In fact, all these properties can be changed programmatically. Now let's say this is a wizard control where we are capturing on step 1 personal details, on step 2 maybe we are capturing contact details, and at step 3 we will show the summary to the end user. So which means programmatically, depending on the step the user is on, I want to change the header text. At the minute it shows personal details on each and every step. We don't want that. We want to change the header text on a step-by-step basis. How do we do that? Okay, we have to do that in the pre-render. We can do that in the pre-render event of the page. So let's copy this just to generate the event handler. Since this is a pre-render event, I'm going to call this page underscore pre-render, and then if wizard1 dot active step index is equal to 1, meaning if we are on the second step of the wizard control, then I want to set the header text of wizard1 to contact details, because on second step we are capturing the contact details of the user. So let's copy that. Else, if active step index is equal to 2, which means we are on the final step, then I want to show the summary to the end user. Okay, let's run this one now. So when the page first loads, it loads step 1 of the wizard where we are capturing personal details, but when I go to step 2 by clicking on the sidebar or by clicking the next button, it shows contact details. When I go to the third page, it shows summary. Alright, let's flip to the web form. Okay, so we have seen the finish previous button and finish complete button. We discussed about header style and header text, and we have another property called navigation button style. Okay, that's nothing but the navigation buttons that we use. So for example, if it's a push button, and then I want to change the back color of that push button maybe to a red, I can do that there. And then maybe I want to change the font, I want to bold that, and then maybe for color I want to set that to white. Again, all these are style properties which we can basically use to customize the navigation button styles. And navigation style, this property basically changes the area where we have the navigation buttons, the navigation layout basically. Okay, let's say for example the back color of the navigation area, I want that to be something like this. Oh, that's a border color. Let's say back color. Maybe I want this color there. Look at that. That's the navigation layout there. And similarly, you can change several styles. Sidebar button style. Again, we have sidebar buttons here. You can configure the sidebar buttons here. Again, the same style properties. And sidebar style. The sidebar itself, if you want to set the background color maybe to something like a black color, we can do that. And there are several other properties. Maybe I want this sidebar basically to be vertical aligned on the top. We can do that. Several other properties. And then we have the start next button image URL. Now if you look at this, on the start, on step 1 we have the start button. Okay, so that's the next button. So start next button type. Okay, again you can configure that to push button or image button or link button, whatever. So if I change it to image button, obviously I will have to specify the start next button image URL. So maybe I go to images and I select the next button there. So we'll get that image button there. Similarly, for the step, the first step is the start step, the last step is the finish step of the wizard control, but then in between we have steps of the wizard control. So on those steps we have the previous and next buttons. So you can use step next button type to change the next button within the steps of the wizard control, and then step previous button type can be used to customize this previous button. So for example, step previous button type, it's a push button. If I change that to image button, then this previous button is converted into an image button. And obviously if you have converted that into an image button, then you have to specify the previous button image URL property. So I go there, I select previous button, and that will be converted to an image button. And you do the same thing to convert the step next button type. We use step next button type property for that. At the minute it's a push button, but I can change it to link button if I want. So there's a link button there. Or I can change it to the image button. If that's the case, then I have to specify step next button image URL. So I go to the images, next button. Okay. Alright, so The next property is the step style property. You can change the step style itself. Maybe the back color, I want to change something like this. That's the step area where you will have controls in the back, for each step. Okay. And then if you look at this wizard steps, you can add steps to the wizard controlled in the HTML source. You can directly type them here, or you can actually use the wizard step collection editor. So if you come here, click the ellipsis button, we get the wizard step collection editor, and you can add a wizard step you want, give it the title, and then set all these properties, and then you can move it up or down using these arrow buttons there. On this slide, you can find resources for ASP.NET C# and SQL Server interview questions. That's it for today. Thank you for listening. Have a great day.